Good afternoon. Getting right down to business here. We're doing it live and doing more at 4 weekday afternoons on 790 KBC, live on the air, streaming live online worldwide at kbc.com. And the on-demand Mottek On Money podcast, kbc.com, Apple iTunes, YouTube, all your favorite podcast platforms. Wild ride for stocks this week and again today, but we saw a positive finish today and for the week. Stocks closing sharply higher today. Wrapping up the wild week that saw the S&P 500 see massive swings on the tariff uncertainty that kept the markets volatile. The Dow came in for a closing gain today of 619 points. The S&P 500 up 95, and the Nasdaq jumped 337. And all three of the major averages ended up booking weekly gains, driven by a massive surge in equities on Wednesday, in which we saw the Dow close nearly 3,000 points higher. Gold hit a record high today, above 3,200. Cryptos rebounded. We'll have complete market coverage coming up here shortly. Banks' earnings also coming in. But first, let's turn to the Main Street economy here in Los Angeles and the rebuilding of the areas of L.A. that were devastated by the firestorms in January. And joining us live now for an important update is Rick Caruso, Los Angeles business and civic leader, philanthropist, mega entrepreneur who is heading up the Steadfast L.A. initiative to rebuild Pacific Palisades, Altadena, and other areas heavily impacted by the fire disaster. Rick Caruso, thank you very much for taking the call here this afternoon.
Frank, thanks for having me on your wonderful show. Appreciate it.
Wonderful and grateful to have you with us here. I know you've had a very busy week based on your terrific social media presence, and you had a big announcement this week. Tell us about the announcement there in the Palisades.
Well, I'm really excited about this, and we've been working very hard at Steadfast LA. That's the nonprofit that I formed, and we have so many dedicated and talented people donating their time and their talent to it. But one of our priorities is to get these places in the Palisades and Altadena and Malibu reopened that really are the centers of their community, to start bringing people back and rebuilding the community. So we announced yesterday, alongside of JARRETT, the coach of the Lakers, who has his own foundation, and alongside the city of LA, Mayor Bass was there. We're going to do a public-private partnership, a very innovative structure to privately fund the rebuilding and the reopening of Palisades Park. And Gensler, one of the all-time great architects from a global standpoint, donated their time to do the design. JARRETT was really the man that was leading the charge and getting people to get behind him on this rebuilding. Called me up and said, would you join me in making this happen and have Steadfast lean in? And was honored to do that. So it's going to get open, and we're going to build. I can tell you what will be one of the best family rec centers for families and kids in the country in the Palisades. And we're going to do it quickly, and we're going to start getting families back in the Palisades, gathering there and playing sports.
See it tonight, read about it tomorrow, but hear it now on Mottek On Money on 790 KBC. We're on the air live with Rick Caruso, and it looks like you've assembled quite an impressive team of business leaders for Steadfast LA, and certainly that was an impressive show of unity in the Palisades at that big event. Tell us about the team and the latest on the rebuilding efforts.
Well, there's a lot going on in the Palisades, as there is in Altadena and whatnot, and it's good. I wish there was more going on, and I wish it was happening quicker, and we're going to continue to be an advocate for the residents and the business owners to get back into their spaces. And I think there's more that can be done. There's no doubt. So I'm not happy with the pace, but there's progress being made. But here's what's really important. So many good people, smart people, are leaning in and pushing to get the right thing done in all of these communities. And that's what yesterday was an example of. And, some people have said, it was surprising to see me and Mayor Bass together, because I've obviously been very critical of her leadership, preventing the fires and responding to the fires, and also in the rebuilding effort. But also the problem that we're dealing with, the devastation, is bigger than politics. So of course I'm going to put politics aside and work with anybody that's going to help get these communities rebuilt and get people back in their homes. And that's what yesterday represented. And let me just say one other thing. A resident like J.J. Reddick and his wife Chelsea, they had only been residents of the Palisades for 6 months. And many of us experienced that park. My kids grew up playing sports at that park. And as a family, we were always at that park. They didn't have that long history, but God bless them. They were the ones that really led the charge. And I'm glad they pulled me into it. And he called me a few days after the fire. And that's the kind of spirit we're seeing out there, Frank. And I'm seeing it in Altadena and Malibu as well. People want their community back. And because of that, these communities are going to be coming back quicker than people think. So I encourage people to rebuild and believe in the future of the communities they love.
Our heart continues to go out for everyone impacted by the fires. You also, your family lost property there too, and Mr. Reddick losing his home there in the Palisades. That's heartbreaking, but it's impressive to see this rebuilding effort going strong thanks to your leadership there. What's on the drawing board at this point? Do you envision some sort of a master plan there for the Palisades? What's this ultimately going to look like?
Well, the Palisades, and again, I want to, also we're spending time out in Altadena and Malibu. Those communities should come back as they were planned. The infrastructure should be the 21st century. There's no doubt. We need the backbone of those communities, undergrounding the power lines, rebuilding all the schools, rebuilding the churches, the synagogues, the senior centers. All of that should be best in class. But the dearness and the quality of those communities, I really believe, should remain. And we also have to be very sensitive. All of those communities housed people who had moderate incomes, hardworking people that lived in those communities for a long time. We have to have a path to bring them back. It can't just be those who can afford to rebuild. And so there's a number of programs that we're doing, like with Samara Homes, where we're donating homes for people who are low, moderate income who have lived in these communities that will get a home for free. We need more of that. We need more support for people who have lost their jobs. Businesses are closed. People were laid off. Restaurant workers, people that worked at other people's homes. A lot to be done, and a lot is happening, but more has to happen. And we need more donations coming in, like for Palisades Park. There's the ability to go on steadfastla.com and click on and donate to the park and donate to support the kids. And we're going to be doing the same for the other areas.
Let's focus on Altadena for a moment. Tell us about the temporary homes that are, thanks to your effort, are being set up there very soon, right? Tell us about the efforts there to rebuild Altadena, the homes and businesses there that were destroyed.
Well, Altadena, as you know, is a beautiful community, and historically, you had a community that was a lot of artists, was also a lot of very moderate people from an income standpoint that had lived there for a long, long time, had a great downtown along Lake Avenue. Much of that was destroyed. Members of the Steadfast team are working on the reimagination of the downtown and how it can lay out, be pedestrian friendly, start attracting businesses back to it. We're also working with the county for a senior center out there and a park area to revitalize that. But the Samara Homes, again, I think in terms of timing with the cleanup, the county is ahead of the city on the cleanup. Will probably be the first opportunity to have a Samara home will be out in Altadena, which we're very excited about. We're going to be doing, all of the landscaping, the hardscaping for free. The house will be installed there, hooked up for free. And if people go online and look at these homes that Samara has, they're really beautifully done. And many of those homes were very small cottage-style homes, so it's going to be befitting with the history, the quality, and the scale of that community.
On the Air Live with Rick Caruso, thank you for sharing that important news with us. And certainly I know you are big on innovation and having these various top business leaders supporting Steadfast LA is something very, very important. Are you looking for more innovative ideas, new technologies, new materials, fire-resistant materials, and so forth? What else is needed out there at the moment?
Well, you can never have too much innovation, and thank goodness, Frank, we live in Los Angeles, which really is the center of innovation. And we're reaching out to everybody, and people are reaching out to us. I'll give you an example. The lines to get into the Palisades or to get into Malibu at these checkpoints is just ridiculous. People are spending an hour to 2 hours to either get back to their home or to get their business opened or to go to work. So I reached out to the founder and the CEO of Clear. Most all of us have that Clear app on our phones that we use in airports or concerts. I reached out to Karen and I said, would you develop an app that residents, workers can have installed in their phone so they can pull up to a station, show their phone, immediately get cleared, and go in and eliminate these lines. And God bless her, she said, I'll create it and I'll donate it to the city and to the county, wherever it's needed. That's the kind of spirit, combined with innovation, combined with generosity and compassion, that are leading the way back. But our leaders need to be reaching out and making those calls. People want to help. They just need to be asked and know what to do. So I encourage our elected officials, our appointed officials, to call people and ask for the help because they're waiting to help. And it will be a game changer for this region. And the speed at which we get people back into their homes, back into their business, and back into having a job.
On the You're Live with Rick Caruso, leader of the Steadfast LA Rebuilding Effort, and certainly on this program and on social media, you've been celebrating the success stories. I know last weekend you celebrated what was happening in Malibu. Every business should be celebrated, right? Reopening following this horrific disaster.
It's a great weekend this weekend. Weather is incredible. Thank God we live in Southern California. So encourage people. I know we're going to do it as a family. Go to small businesses in Pasadena. There's restaurants open. Market City Cafe is open in the Palisades. Go out to Altadena. Go out to Malibu. John's Garden is one of the great restaurants. Pradanoy is a great restaurant. Lucky's is a great steakhouse in Malibu. Easier to get to Malibu through Malibu Canyon off the 101. You can hear Hudson in the back. And support those small businesses out there. How great is that? And they need it. My God, they need it. And that's the ecosystem that we need to create. And I know so many people are doing it, but I encourage all of us to do it. And it's going to be a wonderful day to be outside anyway. So it's a win-win for everybody.
Hudson, the famous golden retriever, now famous thanks to this his first appearance, I believe, on Mottek On Money on 790 KBC. He's the schedule keeper too, I believe, and I see he got some new presents recently. He's becoming increasingly well known. Hudson, the golden retriever. Give us a Hudson update.
Hudson gets a lot of gifts delivered at corporate headquarters. Hudson is actually on the website for CARUSO. If you go to caruso.com and look up our personnel, our team members, you'll see Hudson on there. He's our chief happiness officer. So, but Hudson is well taken care of, well loved, and he gives a lot of love back. So he's doing his job really well.
That is absolutely wonderful, and I know we have a joyous season coming up here. We have a Passover starting this weekend, and Easter. I see the Easter bunnies getting set up there at the Grove. Tell us about that, and of course, so many churches and other faith-based places, synagogues and churches were impacted by the firestorms. Give us your thoughts about this upcoming season.
It's an incredible time to be reflecting, right, and to celebrate. So I wish everybody in the Jewish community very, very happy, joyous, wonderful, mindful, and thoughtful Passover. And to the Christian community that is going to be celebrating Easter, we have Good Friday coming up next Friday. Both of these holidays are times for the families to come together and friends and really celebrate life and be grateful and thank God for what we have, and to pray for those that don't have as much of us, and really put our arms out and bring people along with us that need help. And because of the fires in particular, there's so many people, tens and tens of thousands of people that do need the extra help on this holiday. But look for the good in life and celebrate one another. That's what we're going to be doing as a family, and praying for our community to rebuild and reheal.
Rick Caruso, thank you very much for speaking with us here this afternoon. God bless you and your amazing family, and thank you so much for your amazing philanthropy and your leadership here for Steadfast LA, rebuilding the Los Angeles area following the firestorms. We wish you a wonderful holiday season here coming up, and look forward to your updates. Thank you very, very much for joining us live here this afternoon.
Thank you, Frank. God bless you, and God bless our great area. God bless LA. Have a great holiday.
Thank you very, very much. And again, that is Rick Caruso, leader of Steadfast LA. Go to steadfastla.org to support Rick Caruso's efforts. Live here on 790 KBC. 790 KBC welcomes the Spasmatics coming to the Canyon in Agoura Hills May 3rd. Tickets on sale now at AXS.com. Right now, caller 9 wins at 1-888-795-2222. You can get a pair of tickets to the show if you're caller number 9. Call now, 1-888-795-2222. Tickets furnished by The Canyon, where music meets the soul. Turned out to be a rocking day for the stock market to wrap up the week, and what turned out to be a winning week, believe it or not, despite this week's volatility. We ended on the upside. The Dow coming in for a closing gain of 619 points at 40,213. The S&P 500 up 95 at 5,363. And the NASDAQ up 337 at 16,724. The yield in the 10-year note has shot higher to 4.49% in what was a volatile week for the bond market. Cryptos, too, saw a wild ride with Bitcoin right now down about 400 at 83,425. Ethereum hovering at around 1,567. That one's been under pressure all week. Doge at the moment at 16 cents. The dollar taking a hit overseas in all this. By the way, gold at a record high. Let's not forget about gold here, with gold above $3,200 an ounce. For the week, by the way, the Dow rose 5%, the S&P 500 gained 5.7%, and the NASDAQ surged 7.3%. Helping this week, of course, was the big snapback we saw on Wednesday, in which the Dow closed up nearly 3,000 points, and the other major averages saw epic gains. That was after President Trump announced a 90-day pause on certain tariffs.
This is Women's Work with Nicole Khalil.
I wish you health, physical, mental, emotional, financial, social, and most definitely spiritual.
Redefining what it means to be doing women's work.
I would rather have the temporary pain of discomfort than the avoidable pain of regret.
But hear me when I say this. Believe in something. Believe in yourself. That, more than anything, is absolutely woman's work.
This is Women's Work from Believe. Follow and listen on your favorite platform.
The S&P 500 and Dow, by the way, saw their biggest weekly percentage gain since November of 2023, while the NASDAQ scored its largest weekly percentage gain since November of 2022. We'll be taking a closer look at the market action with investment expert BRYAN Perry, who will be joining me live here shortly. Executives for JPMorgan Chase and Wells Fargo coming out with cautious comments about the economic outlook for the year with their first quarter results today, kicking off the first quarter earnings season. JPMorgan Chase topped analysts' expectations. Wells Fargo and BlackRock posting mixed results, and Bank of New York Mellon came pretty much in line with analyst expectations. We did hear from the CEO of JPMorgan Chase today, Jamie Dimon, who said sharp volatility in the roughly $29 trillion Treasury market could require that the Federal Reserve step in with support for the bond market if banking rules with deep flaws, in his words, remain unchanged. So we saw a nice snapback today following a day of steep losses yesterday. That followed the biggest one-day point jump pretty much in stock market history on Wednesday, where we saw the Dow up nearly 3,000 points. Taking a look at some of the Mag 7 names, and again, we'll be taking a closer look at this coming up with BRYAN Perry here, coming up in the next half hour. Taking a look at some of the movers today, we see GM, Ford, and Stellantis all making moves in a auto sector that's come under pressure over tariff concerns. Taking a look at the Mag 7, some of the Mag 7 names here now while we have the chance. NVIDIA up up more than $3 today at $110.93. Shares of Apple bouncing around this week, closing up more than $7 at $198.15. And Tesla Slipping slightly today, down 9 cents at 252.31. And now the latest news here on 790 KBC. Mottek On Money continues 790 KBC. Nervous time on Main Street as well as on Wall Street. We did see the market rebound this week, coming off a rough week last week. We came in for a closing gain today to wrap up the week with gains. One thing that did help on Wednesday when President Trump delayed for 90 days some of the tariffs that were previously announced, that led to a big rally this week, which put stocks in the plus column for the week on top of today's gain of 619 points for the Dow, the S&P 500 of 95, the NASDAQ of 337. Wild ride for the bond market as well, with the yield in the 10-year note ending the week at 4.49%, and gold getting a big pop today, up nearly $80 to $32.55.30 an ounce, hitting a record high. Silver up $1.44 at 32 and change. Joining us live now is BRYAN Perry, senior editor at Eagle Financial Publications, author of the 25% Cash Machine, investment expert with decades of experience, currently chief investment strategist and portfolio manager for a major New York money manager. His website for investors, by the way, is BRYANPerryInvesting.com. BRYAN Perry, thank you very much for taking the call here.
Okay, it's a great day to be wrapping up the week on an up note there, Frank. We had a slow start to get some footing in the market this morning here, but a rebound effort was made on the heels of, Thursday's broad losses here, following an enormously fabulous Wednesday. So it's a real frenetic week of trading all around. It was good to see the banks show up and put some numbers up. All the banks and money center banks, they put up better than expected numbers here today. And that was a really refreshing note for the market to get started on here. JP Morgan led the way. It was up about 3.5% on the day here, and they put up, just really numbers on top and bottom line. Jamie Dimon, I think Jamie Dimon and a few other heavy hitters had something to do with this Wednesday activity, asking Donald Trump to back off and buy a window of time here so these deals can get done in a manner that's more thorough and thoughtful. Taking a sledgehammer and carpet bombing the market, with that tariff announcement, really took a lot of big money by surprise. A lot of big institutions were leveraged come into that, the big day of the tariffs, and it really, it wasn't really a liberation day. It was, more like liquidation day. And so that really, there was a lot of unwinding in the bonds here, and that's, when you start, when bond swaps and all that start to come unhinged, then it does involve maybe the Fed having to step in here. And thankfully, we did see some of that here today. There were reports of the Fed, willing to step in if necessary here, and that was, and also with Trump being able to be adjustable on his tariff demands, I think that's, the market is looking for a Trump put and a Fed put, that are still on the table, and I think this week they largely got, that wink and nod that they're going to make sure that the bond market stays together. So. Hence, we had a net, up week, but not without, a real sleigh ride of for your money. In general, the dollar is still weak though. It's the lowest level versus the Swiss franc in over a decade, and that just kind of when we saw this new budget bill come through that Congress wants to try to pass. The projections of the non-bipartisan congressional group that looks at this, the Watch Group, is they think you could add unless. We come in with much higher revenues. It could add as much as, close to $6 trillion to the deficit over the next decade. Well, that's going to have to be slimmed down. We're going to have to find other tax revenues and all that. And I think that also weighed heavily on the 30-year bond, as the week we're on there, because that's, everybody's expecting DOGE and the Trump administration to consider fiscal responsibility instead of just widening out the deficit any further than it already is. So that was kind of a downer to hear that. But on a good note, we had very good inflation numbers here. CPI and PPI came in, below estimates, and that was, but that's backward-looking data, and then we saw, UMISH numbers come out, which were basically saying the consumers very concerned about forward inflation and wages and jobs. So, we've got a lot going on here that, there are some green shoots, but there's also a lot of tentative trading here, and a lot of people are wondering whether the economy is really going to slow to the manner of, where these tariffs do take effect, even at the baseline level of 10%. But we've seen these come in before, the market on these big, type whoosh type sell-offs, and then to find its footing there when cooler heads prevail. And I think that in good time here with this 90-day window, and then earnings season gets a chance to unwind here and start, hearing from companies about how business conditions are. I think we'll start to see the market try to, really form a bottom in here, Frank, at these levels here, and try to work through this.
On there live with investment expert BRYAN Perry. What about next week, Ryan? What do you see ahead here? Are we in for more volatility? Even the volatility index had to be halted for, you guessed it, volatility this week. Are we expecting another roller coaster ride in the week ahead? And the limited amount of time we have here, let me also ask you at the same time, any specific places where you're putting money now and or taking it off the table?
Yes, unfortunately, we are going to see some more volatility, I believe, Frank, because we're a headline-driven market right now, and there's a lot going on back and forth. We want to see some phone calls between Trump and Xi on China here. Europe and Canada, Mexico have all started to sort their issues out here, so those things are smoothing out. But in terms of what to do, in terms of people putting money to work here, stick with the U.S.-centric type assets here, which are, they're all-season type assets here. We've been buying some Berkshire Hathaway, we've been buying some American Tower in here. Duke Power, DUK, JP Morgan earlier in the week here, and BJ's Wholesale Club, which is, a smaller version of Costco. These are essentials. And they're strong holdings, they're institutional darlings, and they get, the kind of money flow on days like this, all higher on days like this. So you want to be respecting price action on days where the market is up. What are big fund managers buying and why? Because they're basically somewhat tariff proof or tariff resistant. And they're in businesses that are, all-weather businesses that people have to have. So focus on that and maintain your short list of growth stocks. But there's still more risk out there in the bond market that needs to be completely settled before the stock market can actually get a sustainable rally.
All right, a lot of attention, of course, on the stock market. What about the bond market? We see President Trump making some comments about the bond moves this week, just saying, I'm quoting here now, the bond market had a little moment, but I solved that quickly. He said the bond market is going good. What about the bond market? And that is obviously a lot of concern. Even Jamie Dimon said the Fed might have to step in here to stabilize things at some point.
Yeah, well, the Fed's been embarking on quantitative tightening, which means they're reducing their balance sheet, but they may have to flip the switch and go right back to QE, where they are putting liquidity into the system. Again, I said earlier that when you have free flow of short-term paper even start to look like it's going to seize up, then that's not good. Then the Fed has to go in there and buy bonds and provide liquidity to the market. They control the short end of the curve, Frank, but the long end of the curve is really based upon the full faith and credit of the U.S. government making it out to 30 years. And there was some confidence, a loss of confidence in that part of the curve here this week that has not been fully restored. So I think this next coming week here, it's important that the Fed and it continues to fortify the market, that we're here to back up the market in the event that there's further loosening of spreads and further fracturing of credits and things like that, because that's something that can't get away from you. It's incumbent upon the Fed, whether they like Trump or not, to do their duty and maintain order in the bond market.
The Sean Ryan Show Peak Points. Get timeless inspiration from the very best of the Sean Ryan Show.
What did you think of working with the SEALs? We went out every night going after bad guys. I was humbled.
There was no going back home. I would be in another room crying because I was afraid to go to sleep because of what was coming for me in the middle of the night.
How long did it take you to be able to talk about it?
A long time. But I realized my experiences may help other people too.
The men like yourself are considered legends in the community.
You're right.
The Sean Ryan Show Peak Points. Follow and listen on your favorite platform.
All right, before we let you off the hook here, gold above 3,200, that big pop today. The dollar, as you mentioned, weakening against the euro. It's at 114 versus the euro now. That is really something. And of course, cryptos, too. I saw a wild ride with Bitcoin at the moment, hovering at around 83,000. Your thoughts on gold and crypto here?
Okay, well, gold is certainly going parabolic here, and with the dollar being down. But I think that move is probably going to find some profit taking here going forward here. I think what you're going to find is that the economy is not crunching down into recession type mode. And I think a lot of fear mongering in the media has really dominated the narrative. I think we're going to start to still see the labor market seems to be okay, and I think that gold is going to probably see some profit taking. Short-term traders are going to come off of it. And I think the dollar has a chance here to stabilize at these levels too. This is very positive for multinational companies when the dollar is weaker. They make more profits overseas coming back here. So I see maybe a pivot here for gold, to come up. And again, I've talked this before. Sell some, hold some and trade some, because you get these spikes and you can make good money on these big, big trading ranges. But at the same time, it's the best inflation hedge out there. It's really outperformed Bitcoin by a wide margin. Bitcoin down here at 83,000 looks okay. We talked about the low 80,000 in the range here, and it seems like there's some bargain hunting down here taking place as we speak. So for the week ahead, we should see Bitcoin make some progress here from where it currently sits.
Terrific, Brian. Well, thank you very much for stepping up to the plate here to wrap up an epic week on an up note. So at least some better feelings here, some good news, as Shabuzi would say in that song that's big right now. Brian, thank you very much for taking the call here. That is Brian Perry, senior editor at Eagle Financial Publications, author of the 25% Cash Machine, and his website for investors is brianperryinvesting.com. Brian, always great to have you with us, and especially on a day like today. Thank you very much for joining us live here.
Okay, thanks, Frank. Always a great pleasure to be with you. Appreciate it.
Likewise. Have a great weekend, and out to the freeways now, 790 KBC. Mottek On Money continues here, 790 KBC. President Trump signed a blizzard of executive orders the moment he took office. Many of them face legal challenges. Now the Republican-led House voted this week to limit district court judges' ability to issue nationwide injunctions that have hampered some of President Trump's executive actions. Joining us live now is JARRETT STEPMAN, columnist for the Daily Signal and author of The War on History, The Conspiracy to Rewrite America's Past. JARRETT, thank you very much for joining us live here this afternoon.
Oh, thank you very much.
You've done a very thoughtful article in the Daily Signal on this subject. Give us your reaction to the vote this week and what we need to know about it.
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting development. It shows that there's actual now political blowback to which become, I think, an increasing phenomenon, not just during the Trump presidency this time around, but during his first term in office as well. This idea of the nationwide injunction, which is essentially where a single court, a single judge, shuts down a nationwide policy based on a single case. And I think what this piece of legislation aims to do is to limit those decisions so that it takes place between the plaintiffs and the government itself, so that it won't actually extend to being a nationwide injunction and stopping those policies. That is considered a huge problem within our system. I think it's causing a huge problem, of course, for the Trump administration, but I think it poses challenges to future presidential administrations and Congress, where certain policies are essentially shut down by judges. There's a chance for a lot of court shopping, where a single judge in one part of the country, which opposes an administration, decides to make law for himself. And I think that's what this legislation is aimed at.
So we've been hearing the term activist judges a lot more these days. Give us some examples of the recent high-profile cases where this was a factor, you think?
Yeah, this was big in a recent case about USAID, which was a federal agency where the Trump administration removed 16,000 employees. A judge simply reinstated those 16,000 employees. It came down with President Trump's birthright citizenship order. A judge simply shut it down. And I think, again, with some of these cases, the Supreme Court itself has tried to sort of rein in the lower courts and try to limit their decisions in these matters. And I think that's where a big a change is going to be made. It's not necessarily just going to be through the legislature. It's going to be through the higher courts.
All right, so the House passing the bill to limit district court judges' ability to issue nationwide injunctions, and now it moves on to the Senate, right? What's the outlook here in the U.S. Senate on this one?
Well, you've had some senators, prominent senators, including Senator Chuck Grassley, who is on the Senate Judiciary Committee, write an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal saying that he's also for limiting the use of nationwide injunctions, that he'll support legislation. It was backed by other Senator Hawley from Missouri. So I think there is some support. But, of course, in the Senate, you have the issue that you have to get to 67 votes, which I think at this moment Democrats are very unlikely to back the legislation. I think that's where the issue is. But I think the very fact that this has suddenly become an issue that Congress is looking at shows that some of the problem with these nationwide injunctions. I think it's creating a problem where the courts are losing some of the reputation, certainly with some Republican voters and supporters of President Trump. And you're seeing real pushback now from the political branches.
All right, for those following this bill, it's the No Rogue Rulings Act, authored, by the way, by Southern California Congressman Darrell Issa, Republican here in Southern California. So we're going to keep an eye on that one. Historically, when did I know you've been studying this very, very closely? Is this a more recent phenomenon in recent decades, or when did this become a bigger and bigger issue?
Yeah, and that's what's really key here is that during the 20th century, a nationwide injunction was used about 27 times. During the Trump presidency, this time and the previous time, it's been used just about 80 times. So we've seen a massive escalation in recent years where this used to be considered a truly emergency measure used in very specific limited circumstances to simply a part of the way the courts now function. And I think that is where the real mischief is. I think that's where the courts have overstepped their bounds and are causing, I think, a lot of ire toward the courts, that this is not strictly constitutional. This is the courts taking the law into their own hands and stepping into policy and stepping into the just powers of the legislative branch and the executive branch.
All right, so at this point, anything expected from the U.S. Supreme Court on this, or is now the ball in Congress's court?
So the Supreme Court will be ruling more on these cases, and I think that's where this issue is ultimately going to be settled. Justice Clarence Thomas, Brett Kavanaugh, and Alito have all basically written about this issue, have in previous cases said that the nationwide injunction should only be used in extreme circumstances and very limited circumstances. I think the Supreme Court may even in some ways try to limit the lower courts, because the Supreme Court, I think, is concerned about the fact that the judiciary now is basically getting blowback from Congress, which the courts themselves, they rely on the reputation with the American people. If Congress and the president are at war with the courts, there's very little that the courts can do. I think the reputation is what matters, and I think the Supreme Court will necessarily step in and limit those decisions in the future to restore confidence.
Jarrett Stepman, columnist for the Daily Signal at dailysignal.com, also author of The War on History, The Conspiracy to Rewrite America's Past. Thank you very much for joining us live here this afternoon.
Thank you.
Recapping the day on Wall Street to wrap up a volatile week, but a winning week. The Dow closing up 619 points today. The S&P 500 of 95. The NASDAQ gained 337. We got bank earnings led by J.P. Morgan Chase, and they came in better than expected. Gold shooting higher this week and blazing past 3,200, up nearly $80 today to 3,255 and change. Silver selling at 32.19, up $1.44. For the week, the Dow was up 5%, the S&P 500 up 5.7%, and the NASDAQ gained 7.3%. Crypto's all over the place, with Bitcoin right now hovering at around 83K. Stay tuned now for the 790 KBC News Blitz with Randy Wang. I'll be back Monday here on Mottek On Money, 790 KBC.
The Sean Ryan Show presents Peak Points. Get timeless inspiration from the very best of the Sean Ryan Show.
September 11th happens. What is the first thing that went through your head? September 12th, I'm going back in the military.
Talk about being recruited by the cartel. How do you cope?
Just learning how to find a new normal.
One of the most tragic events in American firefighter history.
You know what comes after.
You have this beautiful life. You have these horrible experiences, yes, but you can do something with them for the greater good.
The Sean Ryan Show Peak Points. Follow and listen on your favorite platform.